more about managing football teams than I did. When it comes to music, I can spoof at the best.
Your sporting career is the best time you'll have, and you know you have to hang on to it for as long as you like, because everything else is pretty crappy.
And this is not lies. Stephen Rothschild has never spoken to Jimmy McGuinness in his life.
All right, welcome along to our Saturday panel. A Saturday panel with a difference today because we're very much focused on what is happening between Wales and Ireland. It is just an hour and 15 minutes away from kickoff at the Principality Stadium. Wales going for a third Grand Slam under Warren Gatland in his last Six Nations game. It's Joe Schmidt's last Six Nations game. It's Rory Best's last Six Nations game. It's very much a grand finale this afternoon. Ireland still have a chance of winning the Six Nations, but it's very much a long shot. They need to win that game and hope that Scotland win at Twickenham for the first time in 36 years. We'll get on to Andy Dunne over in the Principality Stadium in a couple of minutes' time. But first, Johnny Murphy and James Downey are in studio. How are we?
All good, all good.
How big an issue is the roof been open, not open? Is it a thing?
I don't know. I think I probably started a bit early during the week, and something that has created, I suppose, a talking point. Ireland obviously prepared for the conditions this week. I think, maybe, Liam Williams came off. He seemed to have a bit of a shoulder issue or arm issue when he came off the last day. So they probably might look to be going after them conditions wise based on probably a tactical kicking game. So maybe that had to play in it, but look, it's, for me, it would always be roof closed.
It's just Schmidt trying to piss Gatland off.
Probably, yeah.
100%, but it's been raining for so long. How long have we been speaking about this roof? Every year comes up about what are we going to do with it. And look, a traditionalist is going to love it the way it's open. And I think Ireland will want to kind of keep it close as they can, I think, in the way that Wales have gone, and just be it that noise, just keep that Welsh crowd as quiet as they can.
I saw Shane Horgan making the point earlier that Wales spent all this money on building their stadium. They should be allowed to do whatever the hell they want with it. That, if they want to close it, they're the home team, let them close it.
Yeah, 100%, and that's the way it works in most things. It's like, say, for example, in my club in Clontarf, we have a chance of playing on 4G or a grass pitch, and we decide regardless. So we'll decide based on opposition.
I thought there was going to be a revelation that Clontarf now have got a roof on their stadium.
I wish.
I don't think the boom is back.
But we have, you have this scenario of they should be able to close it if they want to close it. But it's amazing now where you see that Wales want to have it closed and want to play that expansive brand, and we're happy to have it open, while I think a couple of years ago we might have wanted it closed.
Yeah, I think it's probably, like I've already said, it's something that they got ahead of early, and it probably has, it's created a talking point that probably has, annoyed a few people along the way, especially, as Jimmy said, it should be a Welsh choice in reality,
Well, let's go to the Principality. The added bonus is that Andy Dunne may get absolutely saturated if the rain comes down at a certain angle. How are you, Andy?
I'm very well, thanks.
Have you wrapped up well for a Six Nations decider for once?
Well, it's not. Yeah, I'm wearing my normal coat, and it's not that cold, and it's not raining, and it doesn't seem to be windy. It's it's balmy compared to this time last year over in Twickers. So we haven't got, even though the roof's open, the badness hasn't arrived yet.
Is it a factor?
I think it is because of the styles and the way we play a tighter game that has we have a lot of passes, but they're short, condensed spaces, and we seek out contact probably more than any other team. So if we get a rainy kind of slippery ball, it will probably suit us. They're playing a bit more expansive, and they embrace risk a bit more than we do in their attacking play. So I think it is a factor, but I think it's you would have thought a natural thing for Joe Schmidt to do. He's going to try and get in Gatland's mind and get in the Welsh players' mind. It's absolutely psychological just to row in and go against what Wales want. You'd nearly think he would do it to spite ourselves, in fact, just to try and lay down a marker early on. But I do think if the rain and wind picks up, it's probably going to lean towards favouring us. Yeah.
A week ago, Andy, you were sat here in studio and we were looking ahead to the game against France, and people were talking about rebuilding confidence and making sure the intensity levels were right. You were saying you wanted to see some signs of a slightly different game plan, and you were talking a lot about Conor Murray's box kicking in particular. Yeah. One box kick for Conor Murray last week against France. Was that enough for you to suggest that Joe Schmidt reacted in the right way to the slow start to the championship?
Yeah, I was delighted. It was probably the first 2 to 3 minutes I thought would be a really good barometer of our flexibility and are we prepared to introduce variation into our game. And the first 2 chances we got deep in our own territory to clear our lines, we ran it out as far as Larmer, and Larmer kicked long, and I think the other clearance was Sexton. So we didn't have a Murray box kick until about 35 minutes, and it was the only one he did in the game. We needed to do some clear changes to what had become a little bit stagnant, I think, and was a tactic that has been hugely successful, but ultimately became predictable. And sides were preparing for it, were dropping big ball carriers deep, like Vunipola did with England, and we seemed to persist with it for slightly too long. But I was delighted that we introduced that change.
I guess the key with it, James, now is that you can always go back to the box kick is the thing as well. Like, you can trust Conor Murray that on a big occasion, if you need to start box kicking a little bit more, that's easy to return to. But the fact that the variety is there, at least you're asking a few more questions of the opposition. And
that's the difference, the variety that we need. I think you look at, Andy referred to the first game, just box kicks all day and nothing from Johne, and then you see, as you say, that adaptation to actually change coming into this last game. And Ireland just needed something else to fire. Conor Murray's under enough pressure as it was. People were giving out about how Conor was playing, how Johne was playing, and be it the style, and everyone saying how the pressure on his box kick is huge, and if he has an off day, then he feels it. And I think just to have a get out, be it Johne, be it someone else, and be it Larmer in the last game, just other people stepping up to help him out, it just takes that weight of responsibility off him.
Did you see enough variety last week against France? Are you reading anything into the win against France, considering how poor France were?
Well, I think the accuracy levels were way ahead of where they have been previously, and I think the run kick variation is definitely something that changes the backfield perspective, so it gives you actually more opportunities to kick to space. And if we can continue that this weekend, I think with Rob Kearney's left foot, I think that makes a big that gives you 2 or 3 options, 2 or 3 extra options down the line that you can use for going the other way, not just right to left, but from also left to right. So it makes a big difference to what opportunities you can and exploit that backfield space.
And I think this weekend as well, or today even, it's going to be such a huge factor manipulating that back three of Wales and having different opportunities and different people who can actually put the ball in behind rather than expecting a box kick. As you were mentioning earlier, you want to test Liam Williams out nice and early. You want to manipulate George North and not let them get into the game. Looking
at the team then for this weekend, Tadhg Beirne finally gets his chance in a Six Nations game. Kieran Marmion's on the bench, so it'll be 36 players, it looks like, that Joe Schmidt will have used during this Six Nations. Only 31 are going to make a World Cup squad. On Tadhg Beirne, this on paper looks like it's a good game for him to come into. Johne, his turnover stats are off the chart, but he's obviously played his club rugby in Wales, knows these players inside out, and also against this Welsh breakdown that have been so strong throughout this Six Nations, somewhere where he can make an impact, a lasting impact in Joe Schmidt's mind. Yeah, well, I think it actually balances up the actual pack dynamic, not necessarily the back, not having an out 7 that they have over the last couple of weeks in Van der Flyer. I think that's, it gives you a proper kind of groundhog who can actually go after and do a lot of the dark arts and go after ball in the close quarters, and it leaves Sean O'Brien to kind of get his ball carrying game going. So it really gives a good balance to the entire pack, not just the back row. You're essentially playing with 4 back rowers and frees up Pete, frees up the lads to do what they need to do in attack, and that's go forward and win that battle at the gain line. He's leading the turnovers in the Champions Cup, and last season Champions Cup Pro 14 he was miles ahead of everybody else. From what you've seen, James, is it easy to break down why he's so good at turnovers? I wish I could answer that one properly. I think he's just one of these players who has that ability to seamlessly fit in places, and like 8's been another position as well. If you're looking at World Cup, Henderson's another one who can cover second row, back row. But he's just got that ability that the Welsh will be looking at today, and obviously they know him so well that he's got that range where he can lean over those rucks and actually really put them under pressure. So coming into the way the Welsh defend, when they put 2 into the breakdown, slow it down. If not, they fan out. So they'll have that. They'll know this guy, and it's a perfect game, I think, for Tadhg Beirne to come in. They know exactly what he can bring, they know exactly what he can do, and they're going to have to keep an eye out for him. Could we flip that then, Andy, and say they know exactly what he's going to do and they know exactly what he's going to bring, and actually they're going to be very well prepared for what Tadhg Beirne might offer?
Well, they know what he's going to bring, but I don't think they'll be able to stop it. He's quite unique. For that height to get in over the ball like he does, he's gets a pretty wide stance, and I know the two lads were probably contributed a bit more to rucking rugby than I ever did as a rugby player. So it's not my it's not really my place of expertise, but I can tell you that it's a pretty scary place to be when you're going down over a guy. A wide stance, you've got to keep your knees off the floor, and your body is completely curled over. And you see Tadhg Beirne and a lot of the guys who are brilliant at this are kind of foolhardy. They're so courageous. They just don't take into account their own physical well-being. You've got guys taking run-ups at Tadhg Beirne's head, essentially. Trying to hit a ruck, probably trying to target his neck, trying to target the back of his head, and he just seems to just take the hits and march on. So it's incredibly brave. It's very, very technical. Welsh clubs, when he was playing with Clonettley, didn't stop him doing it. Neither did Irish clubs. Nobody seemed to have stopped him doing it this year. So I don't see them doing anything specifically different. I mean, unless they start doing things like literally targeting his rib cage, which is completely within the rules. But I wouldn't be surprised if Gatland does really target him physically and gets a few guys to go after him. But I still think he's well accustomed to taking those hits.
I think that's a really important point, that when he first burst on the scene after his first year in Scarlets, there was a danger of kind of second season syndrome. Now that people knew what he was going to be doing, and the fact he was so good over the ball. But as Jimmy's already said, his versatility and the fact that he can play probably 8-6 or second row, people know what he's going to do, but they struggle to stop him. And that's also another dynamic that Wales, they are going to have to prepare for him, which means they're going to have someone trying to target him, but it also frees up the back row, who are also going to be targeted. You can't target everyone, so I think it's a really smart selection by Joe Smith to just create a few different issues for Wales' thought process going into the game.
If they do go after Beirne, you've got to think, well, it frees up a bit of space for O'Mahony, Stander, O'Brien, James Ryan, all to get over the ball too at different points. So he does give Gatland a kind of a unique headache, I think, for today.
There's obviously a fearlessness then to his play, and what Andy touched on there, the technical side of it. I was going to ask of whether what he had was just something that was intuitive, that was something you actually couldn't teach, because he's so far, certainly ahead of other Irish players right now, it seems, in terms of his stats, that he just has this ability, this awareness to be able to read what's going to happen in a breakdown. And
I think that's probably the most important thing. When you go after a breakdown, you have to pick and choose the correct moments. There's no point going after every single breakdown, and what he does really well is he picks his opportunities and he goes after the ball at the correct time. You'll often notice when Munster are they're defending for long periods of time, you can see himself and O'Mahony, they'll be talking to each other, and it'll be like one low, one high, so you get him on the ground, I'll go over the ball. They have those that mini chat in those groups to try and make sure that they're making the most out of each other's qualities. So I think it's his timing. He's obviously a very big guy, so he's tough to move when he's on the ball. From a physical attribute, he's obviously quite flexible, but I think it's his knowledge of when to go after it, but more importantly when not to go after it. I think that that's the main thing when you're going to try and chase ball at the breakdown.
Whenever Ireland play Wales, we always seem to spend a lot of time talking about the breakdown and the two back rows, because they've always generally been full of lines, that just two quality back rows. The Welsh back row this season, considering they've lost Sam Warburton to retirement, Toby Faletau has been out injured, and they've really stood up. The Josh Navidi coming in, Ross Moriarty, Justin Tipperick. Any signs that there might have been a little dip there? There's been no sign of that at all.
No, not at all. I think they've shown a similar depth that we have in our squad. I think our international front row, second row, I think would get on most international sides. Our back row, I think we've got strength and depth, about 8-9 players they're worthy of selection criteria. But Wales, we did think, I think with the loss of Falatown, the retirement of Warburton, we're going to struggle, but they haven't. Ross Moriarty went on the last Lions tour and was one of those kind of dirt tracker play on the midweek games, but really started to push for a test place by the end of that tour. So he's not without his high level experience and exposure. Tipperick has been around a long while and is a guy who's very accustomed to high level Six Nations rugby. So they haven't really shown any kind of weakness with the loss of Warburton and Falatown.
I think Justin Tipperick is someone that's probably lived in Warburton's shadow for a long time, and they played probably a lot of left and right in terms of they played 2 sevens just to try and fit him in the park, and I think it was probably Warburton's leadership that always gave him the edge over Warburton. But in terms of actual physical attributes or quality of player, there was very, very little in it, and I think you've seen him flourish over the last, since his retirement, because he's been given that 7 jersey, and I think when we played Ospreys, he was always one of their best players. I think he's probably one of the most underrated 7s in the home nations, I would think. And
you've also got James Davies, who hasn't been talked about, or Thomas Young as well, so they have this production line of 7s there that are there just waiting for their moment and waiting for their chance.
It's a big day for Sean O'Brien for many reasons. Dropped for the game against France, gets back in because of the injury to Van der Fleer, but also because of the history with Warren Gatland. It'll be the first time they've come face to face since the criticism of O'Brien for Gatland down at the Lions, and Gatland bit back when he was off the ball about 15-16 months ago, bringing up the statistic that O'Brien wasn't part of the Ireland team that beat the All Blacks in Chicago. He's only ever beaten Wales once during his career. Do these things matter?
I think they do. Of course they do. Personal, I wouldn't call them vendettas, but personal issues definitely come into it. Yeah, well, you can if you want. Yeah, just have. But I think they do come into it. There'd be no way that either of them will want to shake each other's hand and be the loser shaking the hand at the end of the day. I think that's something that certainly adds a bit of spice to it, and you can talk it up or you can talk it down, but the reality is it's definitely there. And I don't, Sean felt he was correct in what he said. Whether he was probably a small bit too relaxed at that time when he said it, maybe, but that was his viewpoint. He's entitled to his view, and he obviously felt from the coaching levels that he's been used to that they weren't up to what he expected them to be, and so he's entitled to that, and you have to deal with that. Everyone has their opinions, but if you can't deal with it, then probably that's your issue, no one else's.
Andy, when you touch on the depth that's there for Ireland in the back row, I think there's always been a sense over the last couple of years, even with all his injury problems, that if Sean O'Brien is fully fit, Sean O'Brien starts. With what's happened over the past month and the struggles with injury and also the performance against Italy, do you think that's still the case?
I think it's come a bit more into question. I would have been of that opinion before the Six Nations started, at saying a fully fit Sean O'Brien starts, and that would have been kind of unequivocal for my mind. But I think it's just slightly changed. I think when you see how impactful the likes of Van der Fleer and Levy have been in the last year, it does call that into question. And Sean's durability, which is hasn't been great, and that's just mileage on the clock and bad luck. But I still think he's got enough credit in the bank to be definitely to be considered as a starter. I'm delighted for him that he gets a chance today, but I do think there's a whole subplot going on in terms of Gatland and Schmidt calling Sean back in. There's definitely niggle going on with those two. But what Gatland has always had, I think he really rates the position open side as a key position to sway games. Like when he was the Wasps coach, he had Paul Volley as his captain. When Volley moved on, Gatland sent, in an emergency, sent for Johnny O'Connor and brought him over from Galway to Wasps, and they won Heineken Cups. Johnny O'Connor was his lieutenant with Delalio in that back row. He made Warburton his captain. He had Martin Williams. He brought him back out of retirement for the 08 Grand Slam. he really values it as an impactful position on the field, and a guy who, who's a leader on the field, and a guy who has a lot of sway on results. So Schmidt throwing O'Brien back into the cauldron today is as much Schmidt playing mind games as well with Gatland. I think there's a really interesting subplot going on in terms of how Gatland values that position, and the likes of Sean O'Brien and guys like him who he's coached over his career.
Does Schmidt put as much store in the open side as Gatland?
I don't know. I think he's had to change an awful lot of players at the moment. It's I think we're blessed with the amount of sevens we have at the moment, but it's what type of seven we want to play, what type of back row, what type of blend we want to have across it. And he has that ability to mix those, and I think that just perfect game for Sean to come back, and as Andy mentioned there, that look, it's a subplot, and he's playing mind games, but it's also mind games with Sean to get out there and, okay, if we've dropped you after last week and you're back in there, here's a chance to show you can actually do again.
Yeah, you'd wonder for Sean O'Brien at this stage of his career at 32, and he is such a abrasive player, whether actually a game against Italy is what gets him going these days, whereas Millennium Stadium trying to deny Gatland and Wales a Grand Slam, you'd hope that plays right into his mindset, that like this is going to motivate him more than anything else. Yeah,
well, I think history shows that the two people that really stand up, well, one in particular stand up in big games, is Rob Kearney and Sean O'Brien, and I think that's probably a part of the selection, regardless of the mind games and as we spoke already about the run kick options and manipulating the backfield. Joe has a huge amount of security, in a sense of when we've played in big games, these two lads have really stood up, both for Leinster and for Ireland, and I think that's probably why he leans to these guys all the time. Someone like Rob Kearney essentially got pulled out at the start of Six Nations and he hadn't played at all because he performs on the big days and he has enough credit in the bank that he shows that. I'd expect those two lads to show to really show the faith they've been, to perform today, to put back the faith that has been showed in them.
A good game going on in Rome at the moment, where Italy are about to level it up against France. 55 minutes gone. It's currently Italy 14, France 17, but Italy have a penalty just to the right of centre to level it at 17 all. That would be a hell of a win for Conor O'Shea, and well, for France it's just been an absolute shambles, and well, I jinxed it. He's pulled it to the left and wide. So France continue to lead by 17 points to 14. You're listening to Off the Ball. It is the Saturday panel. Our rugby coverage is brought to you by Vodafone. Team of us, everyone in. Andy Dunne is over at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. We're less than an hour away from kick-off. Johnny Murphy and James Downey are alongside me in studio. Warren Gatland then, bidding for a third Grand Slam as Wales coach, as many as Ireland have ever won in their history. Sean O'Brien's comments after the Lions, I know you say maybe he got caught out, he was down at the ploughing championships when he was talking to Oisin Langan, and he was, as Oisin does, he made him feel quite relaxed, and you say things that suddenly find yourself on the front of the Telegraph the next day. But does it feed into a general lack of respect for Warren Gatland in this country? There's no way he's going to be saying anything like that ever about Joe Schmidt. No, he's certainly not going to be saying that about Joe Schmidt, given how many medals and trophies he's won under him. I think there's an issue over styles, but you can't you can't kind of look back and say that Warren Gatland isn't a fantastic. Probably some people might class him as a coach, some people might class him as a manager. Same as someone like Ian McGeechan might not have been probably the most technically astute coach, but has an incredible record probably as a manager. Same for Declan Kidney, and there are guys like that they put a lot of faith in their team below them, and that's one of the great achievements actually, is that Sean Edwards and Rob Howley have been there for pretty much the entire time, and somehow they've avoided it getting stale.
Club rugby as well, I think, comes into it. Like, you've had that team surrounded by him for God knows how many years,
everywhere together when
everywhere they've gone, they've moved, and as you say, it's exactly that. It's that you're a hands-on coach or you're a man manager, and if you can get the balance right of, okay, you guys look after the stuff in the paddock, and I'll mentally, you think that after 10, 12, 20, whatever, 20 years you get stale, you get bored of being told the same thing, but he's actually got that ability to drive and motivate these players, to push them on week in, week out, and they're still getting performances, and he's had some of those players along the way for a lot longer.
Start to finish, and I think that's a credit to him, and that probably shows what type of man manager he is, that he gets these guys to play for him and continuously play for him. But his record speaks for himself. I would probably class him more in kind of the manager role rather than the coach role, and that, you know, that is a bit of a grey area, you know, because sometimes, you know, I remember someone like Heineken Meyer, he was a manager, he wasn't a coach. He used to step in maybe once every 3 weeks on the pitch, but like he led all meetings and selection and all that kind of stuff.
Which did you prefer?
Depends how good your coaching staff are, to be honest. If your coaching staff are really good and you've got a really good man manager, that is the perfect fit. If one or the other are out of kilter, then that's where the trouble is going to lend itself. And if you have a man manager that oversteps his mark onto the coaching pitch, it can all fall asunder even quicker.
But as you say, it's like Declan Kidney's made a career out of it. You know, he surrounded himself with all those coaches. He was the person who'd be playing the mind games with you and always pushing you to be and get as much out of your ability as you could, those extra couple of percentages, and that's what it's going to be today. It's those extra couple of percentages. And you think that the confidence that Wales would have, the way they've gone recently, and a Grand Slam at home, that Warren would certainly know how to get those last few percentages.
And like, people forget that Warren Gatland was giving guys caps, and he was started a rotation system 5, 6, 7 years ago. Guys might have only played 25 or 30 times for the Ospreys or something, but they played it really well in European Cup games. He capped them. He's capped an incredible amount of players, so he has a massive pool of Welsh internationals. And if you're seen to be that way, everyone feels they have a chance. And I think that's what Joe Smith has created since the last World Cup, that if you're playing well, you'll get an opportunity and you'll get a cap. And I think that's probably what's driving all the Wales. And the Welsh guys, well, from my experience, it's a tiny bit different in that, like, you know, if you're sitting on international duty and you're watching Ospreys, you play for Cardiff and you're watching Ospreys play Leinster, you're shouting for the Ospreys, even though if I play for Munster and I'm watching Leinster play, Jimmy and I are sitting there going, well, wouldn't mind the others win, you know, like, it's kind of one, you know, it's that is, I don't think they have that kind of internal feud in a sense that the Irish guys have.
Easily mergeable is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think so.
Or not.
Yeah, but I think they I just think that they're, you know, he's created this sense of that if you play well for your region, you're going to get an opportunity, and that's all that anyone wants. You feel if you play well and you get rewarded for it.
So everything is go on, Andy.
I think he's got to go down though as one of the all-time greats, just based on his achievements. We've won 3 Grand Slams. He as a nation since in our entirety. He's going for his 3rd Grand Slam today. He's, you know, multiple Lions tours. Sorry, I just got a bit distracted there. James Hook went past me. Remember him?
Yes.
He was resplendent. It was his fake tan that distracted me. So he's still glowing. But no, Gatland was.
You didn't say that to his face, did you?
No, he's about 5 yards away from me. I actually think he might have heard me. He's looking over now, smiling. So there we go.
But I hope he thumps you.
But no, I think Gatland has what the lads were touching on there. I think he's got this man-manager side to his game. I mentioned Johnny O'Connor there when he brought over to Wasps back in the early 2000s. I remember being out with the Harlequins lads. We played a premiership game against Wasps and ended all up on a big session together, really. But Gatland was right in the middle of it, and he was out till 3-4 a.m. and he, you know, not that that's a prerequisite to be a good coach or anything, but he seems to know when to let the hair down. He knows when to allow players to relax. That's a really important management style when you're dealing with elite level players. He's got a brilliant loyal coaching staff in Howley. Robin McBride has been there from the start as well. He's Jenkins in now as a kicking coach. He's got a really kind of trusted group of lieutenants as his staff who are technically excellent, and it does allow him to concentrate on some of the softer details of the Welsh game, and he's done that for years. When he was successful with Wasps, he was the first guy to kind of coin the whole phrase of periodisation in a season, where he was willing to kind of rest players in important games back in October, November time in a season, in a bid to make sure when the business end of the season came around, April, May, that guys were hitting peak levels in terms of physicality and energy levels. And that kind of subtlety to his approach probably isn't appreciated, but it certainly contributes to why he's been so successful.
Have you seen any weaknesses in this Welsh side across the Six Nations that you expect Ireland to target?
I think Hadley Parks is a little bit one-dimensional as a 12. He's very physical, and Gatland has always liked picking, imposing physical players in his back line. But if I was picking the Welsh side today, I would have put Dan Biggar in at 12. Just to add in the kind of big game intensity that he brings. I think he's a better distributor than Hadley Parks as well, and for what you might lose in terms of physical ball carrying, I think you would gain about 2 or 3 other aspects, but he hasn't gone for that. He's gone with Hadley Parks, but that's the only kind of potential weakness I can see in their lineup.
Is that possibly because they're club mates, himself and Jonathan Davies, that there's a level of understanding there between Davies and Hadley Parks, that there's not much risk in a game like this that's probably going to be tight, it's just solid? Yeah,
that could be a small percentage of it. I think you look at maybe going down the line, if you look at that Irish midfield trio, you're going to go with Sexton, probably I'd go with Henshaw and Ringrose, also because of they play together week in, week out. Well, not week in, week out, but they play together more comfortably, they train together, they're used to each other's game plan. I agree with Andy and what he said, in a place to target to be Parks, but even Parks is he trains with Davies a bit, but Davies comes up out of the line a good bit, and they kind of have that umbrella defence, and there's going to be opportunities there where if we can get the ball either, he can be called for pace a few times. I think he's a very good defensive organiser.
He's slow, James, isn't he? Like he's if we can somehow isolate him and get Ringrose with a yard of space either side of Hadley Parks, I think there's real opportunity there, because he's definitely not fast enough for me to be an international 12. Physical and strong enough, definitely, reasonable passer, but I don't think he's got enough speed, and I think that could be a weakness for sure.
I think that's it's how you go after that space. If they are going to use the umbrella, whether you want to attack him on his inside shoulder or his outside shoulder, but you need to make sure that when he comes forward, that he's not getting your man on ball. Otherwise, you're giving up a huge amount of gain line. So if they are going to go after that, they need to make sure that they can give that extra pass when he does come out of the line, and that will give the likes of Earlsey and these guys who are really who have the pace to really exploit his, which, as you've already said, his lack of pace in that cover tackle situation. So it's just important for Ireland how they're going to manufacture going after that space. I think in attack is really, really important.
Just on the depth side of things, and we'll get a chance, I'm sure, over the coming weeks to reflect on the Six Nations and the 36 players. You mentioned Ringrose, and I guess one of the real success stories of the Six Nations has been the leadership role that Ringrose has grown into, and likewise James Ryan. I'm just wondering, those below the line then, the guys he was hoping would really stand up, do you think Joe Schmidt's got as much as he would have wanted depth-wise out of this Six Nations?
Well, I think the numbers speak for themselves.
But they've numbers. Has he got players he can now trust if the first choice 15 are out?
I think you have 4 legitimate options in the centre, between Henshaw, Ringrose, Aki and Farrell. I think they're probably his go-to in that position. There is depth. For me, there's depth across every aspect. Probably the one area that I think probably needs to develop a small bit more is probably the line-out calling, and probably missing Devon Toner has probably showed, especially in Italy, when you see what happened. So I think that's really important, that they try to develop that as much as they can over today and into their warm-up games in August, September time. So that for me is probably the only area, and it's such a technical area that you really need to be doing it in high pressured situations. It's okay to be doing it in training when it's not, but today I'm not sure. It'll probably be James Ryan. I'm sure that we're going to be calling the lineouts today. That's a massive pressure cooker. Do you then make a decision if
you're Joe Schmidt for Leinster, and we'll see when Devon Toner gets back, he's probably going to miss the Champions Cup quarter-final anyways, but do you go to Leinster and say, I want James Ryan calling all the lineouts for the rest of the season?
You can, but I'm not sure the head coach is going to listen to you.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be the case, to be honest. I think as well, you look at other positions that Johnny's mentioned, like, okay, yeah, we're still 9 and 10. You've Jack Carty on the bench. Coming to a game, would you choose him? Personally, I wouldn't, and I'd nearly have Ross Byrne there again ahead of him.
But I think the second best team we have playing in England, and he's not going to be looked at all. You know, I think Ian Madigan, is probably the second best, the second choice 10.
So the second best 10 and the second best 15 are both not eligible for selection.
And probably your second best line-out caller in Downey Green over in Racing. You know, but look, they're the rules. You know, a mate of mine in Leicester used to say rules is rules, and that's what the rules are. So
rules are there to be broken, lads.
Yeah, well, look, do you think Joe Smith's going to break it going ahead?
Joe Smith world.
He broke it for Johnny.
Yeah, but that was agreed before he went, though. You know.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think, Joe, it's an unfair thing in a way that whether it's an IRFU directive, I get it, because they want to encourage people not to go away, but they also run a business, and they run it as a revenue model, and we're going into a World Cup year, and we're not, you know, we have resources, we don't have as much resources as England and France, and if you've got 3 really good guys who are plying their trade abroad, would you not just bring them back in for the World Cup? That's all I think.
Yeah, no,
I mean, they put enough pressure on Joe to win every week, and that's based on the revenue that the senior team generates and how that affects the overall financial model for the IRFU, and he doesn't get any kind of breathing space to work on style or development. It's always he must win the next game. And yet, you know, they're saying, no, 3 or 4 of our best players. Now, that could be Joe's idea, and it seems to be Joe and David Nucifora very much in line or aligned with that. But for me, I don't know. I think they ought to relax a bit and just.
Well, surely the whole thing though breaks down if a week before or a month before the World Cup, for those warm-up games, you allow the 3 lads back in, because suddenly everybody realises for the next World Cup, well, sure, let's go for a couple of years and it'll be fine.
Well, hold on, not everyone is going to get offered a contract to go. It's only the top guys. Like the English and French clubs are looking for marquee players, looking for top names, and they will offer a bit more money. But I think it's kind of an elephant in the room. It's a big fear factor. Everyone's going, if we open it up, everyone's going to abscond. Like everyone's not going to run away to racing clubs. It's not going to get an offer.
I think Jimmy probably knows more than anyone. But actually, in terms of the timing to do it, like IRB Article 9, like if the big issue about not picking guys away who are away is you don't have first choice on when they're available and when they rest and all that. You just don't have that. They're the international rules.
They would have been off playing in the game between Italy and France.
And they were. So, but what happens now is in the world, if he is going to do it, actually the best time to do it, because you have total control under Article 9, is from the 1st of July on, because there's no games for your clubs. You don't have to go back and do any pre-season stuff. You have total control, so you can call in the 3 lads and actually run their block up until they leave the World Cup, because they are international rules. So in a sense you can say, I'm not actually breaking the rules. I don't have first choice on what they do for basically 3 years, but this 3-month period I control it all. And Jimmy probably knows more than anyone on that. But.
Well, I think about that, like, you're going to have players, I agree with Andy in terms of what he said about just because if they open it up that people are all going to suddenly leave the country. They're not going to leave the country at all. Like the way the RFU look after their players, player welfare, your tax back, you know, these small things that will keep players there. It's not small to some of those big contracts. Lads like that only go abroad if you're getting a pretty big whack of a contract, you know, and it's got to make a big difference, because ultimately if you're looking at your basic salary and then you're taking in your tax back, you kind of go, is it worth it to go for such and such? But look, these guys are going over there. If they're personally, I think if they're over there and they're doing the best, they're holding their hand up and they're actually producing week on, week out, as they are, bring him back 100%. I don't know if he's going to do it now because it'll upset the apple cart. Will it set precedence? I don't know. Probably not. But I'd like to see him back.
Me on this one. Maybe it's all part of a greater master plan whereby Donegal Ryan leaves, so they get Tadhg Beirne back into the Irish system. He's up in Carton House all the time. Suddenly you have an extra option. You do the exact same thing with Ian Madigan. You let him go. You allow the other number 10s to flourish, and he's still there as an option. And then the squad comes and the boys are there.
Well, what's the bet? What's the odds on that?
What's the odds on that? Yeah.
Would you have Ian Madigan ahead of Joey Carberry?
Yeah.
Why?
I just think he can control a game better than Joey. I don't think Joey is there yet. Do I think Joey Carbery is going to be a better player than Ian Madigan? Yes. Currently, no. I just think, and the Premiership, from playing there, all three of us play, you need to be able to control a game. If you can control a game at 10, you give your side a massive opportunity, and it's a war of attrition out there. And I think he's done really well this year for Bristol. So I just think he has that tag over Joey Carbery just currently. I think Joey is going to be a better player than Ian, but I think currently he is our second choice. It's
probably a pointless conversation, Andy, but have you seen enough of Ian Madigan to suggest that he's ahead of Joey Carbery right now?
I don't know. I think Ian is excellent, but for me, I slightly disagree with Johne. Just probably more perception based. I think Joey has huge potential, and I think the game time he's got, even in this Six Nations, I think he's, early on, obviously he can show that he has a measure of control in his game. He started in Australia, he started a test, and we were winning when he came off. People forget that. We were actually winning the test match on 65 minutes when he left the field, and all too often I think it's thrown at him that we lost the one test he started. So we were winning when he came off the field. I'm going to repeat that. I think Joey is ultimately our best second choice. I would agree though, Madigan is right there, close by him.
All right, we've gone off on a slight tangent as we wrap this up. Let's get your predictions, Johne.
I'd love to say Ireland are going to win. It's one of those ones. Heart says Ireland, head says Wales. I think Ireland. I think with the roof and everything and the mind games that they have created, I think. And for me, I think Tadhg Beirne selection is probably the biggest one of all those three that we've spoken about. I think Ireland by 3.
All right.
It's just such a close one to call. I just think confidence, the momentum that Wales have got at the moment, where they're at, I just think we're a little bit behind. I do think it's going to be extremely tight last 5 minutes, but I think Wales are going to nick it.
All right, you have the casting vote, Andy.
Yeah, I think I'm with Jimmy on that one. I think Wales probably by 3 to 5 points, unfortunately.
You're not meant to celebrate when somebody agrees.
Johnny's been shot there twice. Delighted.
All right, lads. Andy, we will be back to you over the course of the afternoon. I'd imagine it's starting to heat up in there, or not, with the roof still open?
Yeah, well, it's definitely picked up in terms of noise levels. Hopefully we get to see Catherine Jenkins or Catherine Zeta-Jones or someone coming out to sing the anthem and get things buzzing. So, or maybe even Shirley Bassey, who knows?
Wow. Yeah, Shirley Bassey, that'll be
the older woman.
They'll probably end up with Tom Jones or something.
Max Boyce.
All right, we'll be with Andy at the Millennium Stadium across the afternoon. Johnny's going to stick with us as well. James, you've got to go home.
That's great.
What's your plan for the afternoon?
Go home, watch the game, feed up, listen to Johnny.
God help you.
Yeah,
all right.
I know, yeah.
It is, just over half an hour to go until kick-off. Italy got over the try line, but they must have just been held up because France still lead by 20 points to 14, but certainly Italy's best performance of the Six Nations so far. Now, how much of that is down to the usual French shambles, maybe we'll look into a little bit later. But 10 minutes to go in Rome, France leading by 20 points to 14. So that's our Saturday panel. That'll be up on offtheball.com. We're talking football next with Gary Breen.
Join the conversation. Text us on 53106. Texts cost 30 cents.
Don't miss your chance to save big at the Harvey Norman Big Weekend Clear Out. We've cleared out our warehouses and stockrooms to find you the very best offers. Unmissable deals, like up to 30% off Nespresso machines, up to €400 off laptops, sofas from just €389, and bedroom packages from $299. And we're matching all competitors' prices, even their sale prices, so no need to shop around. The Harvey Norman Big Weekend Clear Out must end Monday.
Go! Don't forget, we're closed St. Patrick's Day, so shop online at harveynorman.ie.
Mattresses Delivered will deliver your mattress immediately to any part of Ireland, free. Quality and best prices guaranteed. That's mattresses-delivered.ie. Don't forget the hyphen. T's and C's apply.
These are uncertain times.